This episode of The Town is presented by the Walt Disney Animation Studios' Zootopia 2, now nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. The Hollywood Reporter hails Zootopia 2 knocks it out of the park with its dazzling visuals, sophisticated humor, and genuine emotion. For your consideration for Best Animated Feature. It is Friday, February 20th. Most books written by Hollywood people are all about success, the iconic movies, the career path to becoming the biggest star in the world. But there's a new book out by a Hollywood person, and it's all about mistakes and failure. And it's most surprising because it's co-written by a guy who made it all the way to the top of the business. Michael Lynton was chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures from 2004 to 2017, a very successful run that also included the devastating Sony hack of 2014, an act of international cyber terrorism that Lynton is now blaming on himself. In a new book with Joshua Steiner called From Mistakes to Meaning, Owning Your Past So It Doesn't Own You, Lynton opens up for the first time about the hack and what he says was his grave error in greenlighting The Interview, which, if you don't remember, was the Seth Rogen movie about two guys sent to kill Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. It's a silly comedy, but the movie indeed ended with the assassination, a fact that the North Koreans did not love. And the U.S. government concluded they decided to hack and cripple Sony's computer systems in retaliation, leading to the release of hundreds of thousands of personal documents and emails. Lynton says his error was getting swept up in the emotion and hanging out with movie stars. Quote, I had grown tired of playing the responsible adult, of watching the party from the outside, he writes. There is a long history of stars charming execs into making their movies, of course, but Lynton wasn't that guy, or at least he thought he wasn't until The Interview. And he's talking about it today on The Town for the first time. Today, it's Michael Lynton and learning from mistakes and failures in Hollywood. From The Ringer and Puck, I'm Matt Belloni, and this is The Town. All right, we are here with Michael Lynton, who is the chairman of Snap, the former chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures, and the author of a new book that is called From Mistakes to Meaning, Owning Your Past So It Doesn't Own You. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Nice to see you.
You too. So it's been a while. I mean, you and I both went through the Sony hack on very different sides of the equation.
Yeah.
You were experiencing it firsthand, and I was covering it and sort of in daily astonishment of what was going on. Very rare that you see a Hollywood person write a book explicitly about their failure or a time in their life that did not live up to expectations. Why in the world did you do this?
The book in its entirety is about mistakes. And we interviewed, it goes back to a time I wrote it with Josh Steiner, my partner in this, good friend. And he, about a few years back, said to me, we were going for a walk, you know, there are all these books about failures that are sort of humble brag books. But what I think is really interesting is mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Not everybody has the opportunity to have a big failure. Do you want to do this? And I'd been, you know, this thing, the hack and it's what came afterwards had been rattling around in my head for years. And I had not been wanting to deal with it. I had not been wanting to really think about it. And I felt like this was a really good opportunity to bring it to the fore. And it wound up to be a great experience.
Interesting. You find it cathartic almost to sort of put this out there? Because you've never really talked about this before, kind of right now. I mean, you wrote the book, but this is the first time you're really talking about the experience as you lived through it.
Absolutely. So, yeah, there were a few times that I spoke with the press during that time, and you and I probably spoke then too. But the minute it was possible to put this in my rearview mirror, I did exactly that. And I never spoke about it. The point to the book and why I did this is by never dealing with it, never really understanding why I made the mistake, and obviously being embarrassed and ashamed of what had happened there, it really was not a healthy thing. And by exposing myself to what actually happened and really trying to get to the bottom of it through this interview process that the book takes place, it was incredibly helpful to me.
So let's get into this and what you call your terrible mistake of greenlighting The Interview.
Yep.
You say that you made that decision, quoting your words, on the fly, outside my normal process. So take us into how this movie came about. We all know the movie that as it came out, Seth Rogen, James Franco,
The Interview.
Randall Park. But what you reveal in this book is that there was a lot of debate at the time about whether to make this movie, even after you greenlit it. So take us through, the process and the table read and everything.
So what happened was we had made a lot of movies with Seth Rogen, had real success with him in the R-rated comedies. So had Universal. So he had two places to go. He was in an active relationship with both. He presented Amy Pascal with the movie first.
She was co-running the studio with you and running the studio part. You were her boss as the CEO.
Right. And she really wanted to make the movie because everything up until that point had been successful. There was something in the back of my mind at the time that I was a little bit nervous about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And so we both decided to get me comfortable with the whole thing, we would have a table read. Now, because we were in a competitive situation, we had to make the decision very quickly. I walk into a room filled with actors and executives. I was the only guy there in a suit, which was typically my role. The guy sitting there in the dark suit. And the whole thing started, and it was hilarious. Everybody was laughing. And when it was over, people were high-fiving and saying, let's do this. And for the first time, at that point, I'd been in the job for about 10 years. We had a very strict process in place as to how we greenlit this thing. It just went out the window. And I said, let's do this. Now I understand perhaps why I made that move, but it was very much out of the norm for me and for the studio.
You write in the book that for a moment, I wanted to hang as an equal with the actors. I had grown tired of playing the responsible adult, of watching the party from the outside while I played Risk.
Correct.
I mean, that's a pretty nice summary of what it means to be a studio head. You have to be the adult in the room. And what you're saying here is that for the first time in the job, the talent worked on you. They worked the room and you fell for it.
I think it was a combination. I think it was absolutely what you say. And it was also, I had been in the job long enough that I'd grown a little bit weary of constantly being Dr. No, Mr. No, because that was the job in effect, and trying to make sure that it was the responsible thing to do to make a movie. And you're right, it all went out the window in a moment.
From Rogen's perspective and from the filmmaker's perspective, you were backing them. They had made you a lot of money. They had great creative and comedic instincts. They wanted to do this. And you work at an American studio. You should be able to satirize the leader of a fascist regime and not worry about your entire company being attacked. I mean, that would be the argument there. But you're saying that you did have those reservations.
They were a little bit in the back of my mind. I can't say they were at the forefront because I wasn't, North Korea in that moment was in a very different place in the American public's eye than it is today. Primarily, I think, because Kim Jong-un was new in the job. His father had died a couple of years prior. But no, there was something, needling me in the back. But in that moment, it just, I responded.
But then you say that within a week, I had come to my senses and recognized that this time the writers had gone too far with the subject matter. You then asked them to take out the assassination and tone it down. And Rogen, according to you, called you a coward and you relented.
Yes, we exactly right.
Everyone's playing their role here. Everyone's, the filmmakers are doing their thing.
It's totally fair what you're describing. I wrote it. It's exactly what happened. Amy and I had a lot of conversations about it at the time. I got queasy about the whole thing. We did go to him and say, listen, would you take that part of it out? He said, no, that's the whole point. If we don't have that, I'm not interested in making the movie. We'd agreed to make the movie, so we stood by our word.
And in his defense, it's not as funny if it's not Kim Jong-un. I mean, you got to admit that.
For sure not. The question is, did you have to send a missile and, do what we did at the end of that picture?
It's funny that you are so open about this because this has never been revealed during the entirety of the hack.
No,
it was always that we made the movie we wanted to make. and then we were attacked in an act of cyber terrorism.
Right.
But you're now saying that for the first time that we actually tried to pull it back and rein it in, and the filmmaker said no, and we went along and backed the filmmaker.
We actually tried to rein it in twice. We tried to rein it in at the beginning, and then once the picture was shot and we put the trailer out and the North Koreans started threatening us, we tried it again. And on both occasions, the filmmaker stood by the movie, and we stood by the filmmakers.
But it's interesting to hear you now say that you call that a big mistake. I mean, a lot of studio heads would say, I would do that again. I would back my filmmaker again. But you're not saying that.
No, because I think in retrospect, you got to remember, I was working for a Japanese company, which has its own specific relationship with North Korea. Not a good one, I should add. It was definitely not the responsible thing to do. So in retrospect, what we probably should have done is passed, and maybe Universal would have said yes.
A very different hack. We'd be talking about Comcast emails.
We would have been talking about but I will say, once we did say yes, we stood by those guys, and we stood by them all the way through the process.
You did ultimately get the movie released. Some theaters showed it, and you put it out via Google and Stripe. I remember this very well over the holidays, trying to watch it on streaming platforms and trying to figure out how to watch the movie.
Can you believe that 10 years ago there wasn't streaming platforms, or not the way we know them now? Yes, exactly.
I know.
There wasn't a way to get it out.
Now it would be on YouTube in like 2 days.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. It wouldn't have been an issue.
Although you could have done that at the time, but obviously there wasn't the mechanisms to set up payment and all these other things.
No, none of it.
It's funny because you obviously you have a lot of animosity towards some of the journalists that were covering this at the time. I remember you and I having some conversations about that and what we were covering. And we were at Hollywood Reporter, we were pretty tame in terms of what we were covering in the stolen emails.
Yes.
Some outlets were going really, really far and, publishing very private things about the people. And, we've sort of focused on the business stuff, but you say in the book that you still have some animosity towards a lot of those journalists, and you have animosity towards Rogan still, where you don't think he was apologetic enough for the support that you showed him.
Well, no. So let me qualify both. So on the journalism side, you're 100% right. These were stolen emails, and there was a lot of dumpster diving going on. And to your point, you're right. The Hollywood Reporter did report on this with restraint, and they talked about the business side of things. A lot of other outlets did not, and they went deeply into personal matters of different people at the studio. And I was really disappointed in that, in the journalists. On Seth, my disappointment was not that he wasn't apologetic enough, but that he never acknowledged the fact that all of these folks at Sony had they were made incredibly uncomfortable. A lot of their personal information was revealed. They had a really tough time of it. And I would have hoped that he would have thanked them at a very minimum, in some way, shape, or form. But he didn't. He chose not to.
Well,
now, he was also caught up in all of this. I'm sure he had other things.
Pretty traumatic, I imagine.
Absolutely. And he and I never spoke about it afterwards, so I'm sure he's got his side of things as well.
Well, he's done interviews in the past where he said that he's not even sure it was the North Koreans. He said a couple of years ago. I mean, are you 100% positive it was them?
When the NSA and the federal government tells me it's the North Koreans, I don't have a better source than that. So yes, I think, yes, I would argue it's 100% the North Koreans.
I want to get into this psychological thing that happened to you. You write about and how you were swayed by the talent, and Rogan and Franco are lighting a joint and having a great table read, and everybody's getting caught up in the moment. Isn't that kind of the history of Hollywood? That the agencies, I know, try to set up these situations where the talent can prove to the suits, your term, that this is a project they should get involved in. The history of Sundance is getting the right crowd into that premiere screening so the executives feel like there's momentum and juice in the room. I mean, is it so bad that you would be caught up in emotion and decide to make a movie that you later say, oh, maybe that wasn't as smart of a decision as I should have made?
You're 100% right that is sort of the modus operandi for a lot of folks. And you're right that talent can be incredibly seductive. The reason most studios, in fact, all studios, I would think, certainly Sony at the time had and today has a whole process in place to prevent that from happening. In part, it's for that reason, right? You want to get out of that room. You want to get back.
That was Amy's job.
Yes. And you want to get back in the room with some sober thinking people who have a couple of financial statements in front of them and some other people there so you can make a rational decision. But what the book tries to do, because it's talking about mistakes and why people make mistakes, is what is the emotion that's coming to the fore in those moments and where is it coming from? It turns out it comes from a place, in most instances, way in your past where, you form a certain way of seeing the world and that gets triggered in that moment.
So what about your past led you to that moment that caused you to want to hang with the cool kids and greenlight the assassination movie?
So what I write in the book is at a very young age, I was moved from the United States to Holland, where I didn't speak the language, where I was sort of thrown into the middle of things, my sister and I. And I was extremely lonely for a long period. And it sort of engendered in me a desire to be part of a crowd, part of the cool kids, so to speak, because I was sitting by myself a lot of the time. And I never really lost that. And in that moment, it rose up and got me motivated to make that decision. I certainly didn't realize it at the time.
It's funny because the character that Seth Rogen plays on The Studio is kind of similar to what Michael is describing he was going through at Sony, trying to fit in with the cool actors. That is the character that Seth is playing on The Studio a little bit.
That is funny. I've only watched an episode and a half of that show, but you're right. That the little bit I saw of it, he definitely plays that role.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a running joke in an episode about the talent charming him and trying to get things out of him. Greta Lee is trying to get the private plane to a premiere, and someone else is trying to get the movie greenlit. It's like everybody, as a studio head, everybody wants things out of you, and they're going to use whatever charms they have to try to get it. It seems like that's kind of part of the job.
100%. And that's why you wind up saying no most of the time.
Yeah, and why you don't go to the table read.
And why you do not go to the table read. If it weren't set up like this in a competitive situation where we had to make a decision in the moment, I never would have been in that room, ever. Right. I never went to table reads.
And it wasn't a financial decision. I'm sure The Interview looked great on paper.
I mean, the movie...
It was this other thing that was hovering over it that ended up becoming the problem.
Exactly. No, from a financial standpoint, given Seth's track record and given what that movie cost, it was an easy decision, frankly.
You describe in the book how you define mistakes differently from failures.
Yeah.
Can you explain that for us?
Mistakes, and this is an interesting one to look at. Failures are when people come together and in a very methodical way come to a decision that has ambition. Like something big should happen. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't work. Mistakes are when a single individual, and in this case, despite the fact that there were a lot of people in that room, I was the only person who was holding out for a decision. When one individual who's pretty emotionally charged makes a decision in the moment, and bad things happen as a result. And that's exactly what happened here. And everybody makes mistakes, and we make them all day long. It turns out not that many people actually have the opportunity to have failures.
You would describe the Sony hack and what led to it as a mistake or a failure?
I would describe it as my mistake. My mistake that I made in that moment. Yeah. And nothing to do with that. I can honestly say that.
And by the way, the emails are still online. You can still go and search those emails. How is that possible?
Well, I mean, in the middle of all this, we forget the cast of characters. You probably don't because you were around then. Julian Assange. Remember that? Yeah. He was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And he decided that he would wiki all of my emails to demonstrate to the world what a U.S. executive's correspondence looked like. And that's how...
What a guy.
What a guy. What a guy. I have him to thank for that.
Do you still have a little bit of animosity towards the people that didn't speak up in Sony's defense? I mean, at the time, the mayor of L.A. wasn't in your corner. The MPAA that you paid $20 million a year in dues to didn't do anything for you guys. The president, Obama, was, kind of threw you under the bus at that press conference that was famously covered and you write about. There was not a lot of voices in your corner.
No. Well, in fairness to President Obama, he was caught in the moment, as I described in the piece, and he subsequently called me and apologized for it. So I don't blame him. But you're right. I write this in the book. In a previous life, I'd been in publishing, and I'd gotten to Penguin Books a few years after the Satanic Verses were published. And there, the whole publishing community came around Penguin, and the bookstore owners were supportive. In this case, nobody. Nobody from the studio world. As you point out, the MPAA wasn't there. There was only one voice that was public on the subject, and that was George Clooney. And he was
I remember that.
Incredibly good. He was courageous. He came forward. He spoke his mind, and I'm very indebted to him.
Why didn't anyone else? Were they afraid?
They were. I mean, by way of example, so if you think about it, for Satanic Verses, every bookstore in America carried that book. When I went around, when the theater owners finally said they wouldn't carry it, I started calling Facebook, Netflix, you name it, because there were places to get it out. Everybody was worried they would get hacked. Same with the studios. When I started asking around, like, why aren't you guys coming forward and helping out? Same thing. Everybody was worried about getting hacked. So that the North Koreans might turn on them. So there wasn't anybody out there supporting us. It was really disappointing.
Do you fear that they're still out there and you're now talking about this again?
No, I don't worry about that. Not lately. I have no plans.
I imagine that you put a lot less in email these days.
I never put that much in the first place, but I certainly don't put much there now. That's for certain.
Yeah.
That's for certain.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the state of the business since I've got you on the show. And it almost feels like you got out at the exact right time in 2017. Does the Hollywood that is going through what it's going through right now, does it bear any resemblance to the Hollywood that you left in 2017 in your mind?
Yeah, no. I mean, a lot of the same people are there and a lot of the same companies are there for sure. But overall, it's radically different. As you know, the streamers have upended everything at this point, and you combine that with where the state of affairs is as far as Los Angeles is concerned, and it's pretty unrecognizable to me. When I go back to LA, which I just did in the fall for a period because we sold our house there finally, I was really surprised by how the city has been affected. I really was.
How so?
I mean,
just the lack of activity.
Yeah, there's
or
nothing
what
going on.
it?
I think the city's in danger of becoming the sunny version of Detroit.
Yeah,
I was slightly stunned.
And that's just because of the flight of production and the downturn in content production and all of it.
Exactly. I went to a couple of studios because I had time on my hands for lunch. People asked me over. There was nothing being shot. It was like going into one of those. Not that I did it at the time, but going around a factory I can imagine in Michigan in the 80s. It was really something.
What would you do about that?
What would I do about it? I mean, I think
and not to put you on the spot and ask you to solve massive problems.
I don't know enough at this point to understand what economics would bring movies back, but I do think at this point the industry needs some real incentives that are based in Los Angeles to return production there.
Interesting. Sony went after Paramount when that was for sale. The Ellisons got it.
I saw that.
Now the Ellisons are going after Warner Brothers, as is Netflix, which has a deal. What's your perspective on that situation and how it might play out?
You know what? I know enough from having been in some of those rooms, because, I was part of that consortium that bought MGM, to know that if you're not in the room, you really don't know what's going on. I know what you know, Matt, which is I'm reading it in the papers. It appears right now that Paramount has an opening, but I have no idea where that comes out. I'm sure people have a better understanding of it than I do.
It's an interesting perch from Snap, looking at this 100-year-old film and television business and where it is right now compared to where the digital players are right now.
It is.
Is it more exciting than your old job?
Is what more exciting?
Is being part of a digital player like Snap with a growth trajectory
No.
looking at the next 50 years of content versus a film and television studio that maybe has seen its best days behind it?
No, both were really fun and both are really interesting. I think the reason why it's so dramatic, what's going on in Hollywood at the moment, is if you think about it, you mentioned 100 years. Those 6 or 7 players that were there, or 6 players, they were pretty much there until about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, without anything happening to them. It's if you look at it, it's probably the most stable industry in the history of American business. The same folks have been around for 100 years, and finally now it's shifting through consolidation and everything else. Different owners.
And the internet.
And the internet. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That changed it all.
All right. So back to your book for my final question. What do you want people to take away from this? If people in the industry are looking at your experience and what you wrote in your book, what's the lesson from making mistakes and how you have dealt with them in your life?
Well, I'm not sure I would deal with them in the way that I used to deal with them. Let's focus on maybe how I'm dealing with it in this instance.
Okay.
Since that piece that just came out, there's an excerpt in the Wall Street Journal. I've gotten a bunch of people who still remember me reaching out from Los Angeles and saying, "Wow, you're really honest. I made mistakes like that too. I'm not sure that I would be that honest." And as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, it's been really helpful to me. The point to the book is exactly that. The point to the book is really to not avert your eyes, to really try and understand what it is that caused you to make the mistake in the first place, and then equally to try and deal with, in an honest way, the ramifications of the mistake, not to sort of bury it and stick it in a drawer. And I think, we all make mistakes. I dare say in Hollywood, we make a lot of mistakes all the time because you're making decisions on your own. And a lot of those things are filled with emotion. I think the town would benefit from reading the book and dealing with mistakes differently. I know I did.
Well, the other lesson is stay away from charming and charismatic movie stars.
That is always true. That is always true. That's a true statement, Matt.
All right. Well, Michael, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
We are back with the call sheet. Craig, have you been to any of these Timothée Chalamet career retrospective events that are going on in LA?
No, but I did see that he was at my local pizza shop recently. So
he was.
Yes. I just missed him.
Strategically dining out in Brentwood to reach the Oscar voters that are deciding on his fate right now. No.
Is he the youngest actor ever to do a career retrospective?
It's ridiculous, the fact that they're doing this. But if you know the Oscar race and how it works, very difficult for a young actor to win Best Actor. The Academy loves to vote young actresses for Best Actress, but it's very difficult. He would be the youngest winner in, I think, 30-something years to win. And so
he'd be the second youngest ever, I believe, behind Adrian Brody.
Yes. So what is his campaign doing? They're like, oh, we're going to show everybody that he does have a body of work, that he has worked with amazing filmmakers. He might be 30, but he's got Chris Nolan. He worked on Interstellar. He's got Denis Villeneuve with the Dune movies. He's got Luca Guadagnino with Call Me By Your Name. I mean, he's got these filmmakers.
He's got Greta Gerwig twice.
Greta Gerwig, amazing. They're doing this, and it's an extremely smart campaign move. Leo has the body of work and the history with the Academy, and that was their weakness. And now they are showing the Academy that it's okay to vote for Timmy because he has put in his dues. And this is causing me to change my tide on this. I am going to now switch I was very much in the Leo camp, despite the odds, despite the momentum for Timmy. I thought that Leo would win the SAG and that Leo would win the BAFTA and ultimately win the Oscar. I'm changing that. The Timmy campaign has been too good. I'm changing my vote to Chalamet.
I mean, he's a heavy favorite now. If you look at all the gambling odds, he's basically a 4-1 favorite. So not exactly a hot take, but maybe those odds are going to get even worse. So you should get your money in now.
No, I'm not saying that I'm going out on a limb here, but I was officially telling people that I thought Leo would be an upset winner.
And now you're convinced.
I'm no longer doing that.
I think it's helped Timmy. This is his third Best Actor nomination. And I think it helped that he had another one last year. Because it almost feels like it's a little more earned, like it's not out of the blue, that he just had one that he didn't win for. And people thought he had a chance. And so now that this is happening again, I do think there's a little bit of, it's easy to come around to the fact that he deserves it this time because he just lost last year.
Yeah. And these are all about endorsements. When you trot out a Chris Nolan or a Denis Villeneuve, this is a mark of acceptance that this guy is one of us and we are putting our stamp of approval on him and on you for voting for him. And there's a long
Why isn't
history of,
Leo doing this?
he has done stuff. He's popped up at different things, but he doesn't need to. What do we need? Do we need, Martin Scorsese to show up and be like, yeah, I love working with Leo? I mean, sure, it would help, but he doesn't do. And also, Leo's already won an Oscar. So he's going to do what he needs to do to like help the film win Best Picture. But if he doesn't win, like, okay, whatever. Timmy.
So you think it's
this.
almost a sign of Leo growing up? It's a sign of maturity that he is not thirsting for the Oscar.
I do. It makes me kind of want him to win a little bit more, but he doesn't need this. And I'm not saying he's not doing anything. He's doing a lot for him, actually.
Yeah.
The fact that he's showing up at these events and he's done some press and he's done screenings with different people, but you don't see, he went to Santa Barbara and did that whole rigmarole there. Timmy is really working it. And I think people respond to that kind of enthusiasm. You need to tell these voters that you want to win for them to feel like they should endorse you. And he's doing it. And I think it's going to work. All right, that's the show for today. I want to thank my guests, Michael Lynton, producer Craig Horlbeck, editors Jessie, Lopez, and John Jones. And I want to thank you. We will see you next week.